There's a family that is going to avoid it because they think that if we talk about it, somebody's going to die. People would either avoid or procrastinate. They don't want to talk about this situation. Spoiler alert, we're all going to die. This is how it's going to happen. So now you have to make the decision. Do I want to leave a legacy, or do I want to leave a legacy and a mess?
What does that mean? Why is it important? Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. My guest today is David Edey. And David, we met because you have an interesting topic that comes up often when we talk about end-of-life planning, and that is executorship. Thank you so much for being here. And tell me, the past 40 years or so, you've been working in this space, and what got you interested in it?
Well, first off, Niki, thank you so much for having me on the show. Yes, I'm a certified executive advisor, been in the financial planning industry for over 40 years. And about 10 years ago, I lost my parents to cancer. They died within a year of each other. And I didn't know that would be the start of a long, tough journey. Changed my life. Also became life-threatening because of all the stress that they went through of selling their estate. And it all kind of started when I was sitting on a cold courtroom bench. My heart was sinking as I was listening to a lawyer and two lawyers and a judge determine the fate of my parents' assets. It took us 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 to settle their estate. And what had brought me to the point of, we're having this conversation about being an executor. My parents, they never had the conversations with the three children who were executors. And I've come to find out that most families are a bit messy. And when it comes to settling an estate and having executors, there isn't any conversations. So during the pandemic, I wrote the book, Executor Help, How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. And it's a book about tips on how to handle the estate, whether you're preparing your estate and you want to prepare your executor, or someone who's the executor and who's been handed the job of being an executor, because 99% of the time people take on the job as a favor to someone, and it's one last gesture. But 99% of the time, most people have no idea where to start, what to do, and they get overwhelmed. That's how I ended up here.
I mean, we all have a story. I mean, when we start our businesses or even our consulting, because we have a passion, and that passion usually comes from a wound that we have been struggling with ourselves. And I just want to roll it back a little bit, because for some people, the first question I'll ask is, do you have a will? And they either say yes or no. And if they say yes, and then I'll say, do you have, who are your executors on the will? And sometimes I get kind of a blank stare, like deer in the headlights, as though I'm throwing them a term that they're not familiar with. So maybe we could just break it down in Executor 101. What does that mean? Why is it important? And why most people they're not super clear on who that executor should be.
Well, think of the executor as the quarterback. You've asked someone to handle all of your affairs once you're gone. You need an executor when you're alive, but you need to prepare them when you're dead. So the executor is going to be there to make sure that everything is taken care of, which means, there's probably about 160 tasks that people have to go through. And for most estates, for an executor, probably takes about an average of 100 hours or 18 to 24 months. In my case, it was 7 years to settle the estate, because there's so much to do. And on top of that, you also have to handle the grief that most people go through when they lose someone. And not only the grief, but you also have to handle the beneficiaries. So the executor is tasked with a big job of settling the estate, paying the taxes, and distributing the assets based on the will to the beneficiaries.
And what most people don't understand is like they, whoever you choose as an executor really needs to be not just mature, like emotionally mature. There needs to be a level of business acumen, an ability to handle administrative activities. And when I speak to some people, they're like, they just assign maybe their favorite child or their oldest child or best friend without even asking them or explaining to them what the responsibilities are. And that to me is just a huge risk.
Yeah, in my book, I talk about a friend of mine. She's actually been an executor 6 times, but in the book, I talk about how her one day she got a phone call from a lawyer, and her uncle had named her executor, but she knew the dynamics of her cousins, and they knew that they didn't get along. So she told them, "I don't want to be part of this nonsense." So she had them withdraw her from there. So the first thing you want to do is make this the decision of, is this person going to be reliable and can take on the job? Because again, there's going to be some family dynamics. Like you said, you might choose a child over another child. The other child might be upset, or you might choose all three of them just to keep the peace. But that may not be the best decision, because if you choose all three, none of the paperwork can get done until we've got 3 signatures. So you got to think long and hard. And then again, the person that you choose, they may not have the business acumen, but you also want to put them in a situation whereby they can reach out and touch different advisors, which mean a lawyer, an accountant, the financial advisor. Those are probably the 3 main professionals that you're going to need as a starting point. But the executor is still going to have to deal with someone who's the real estate agent, because they got to get the house sold. They've got to get the people to clean the house. So there's a whole bunch of other professionals that they're going to need to deal with. But the 3 basic ones is the lawyer, the accountant, and the financial advisor.
And for some people, they might not have even those service providers in place. Like they might not have a lawyer, an accountant, or a financial advisor, especially when you're dealing with estates that might not be as high value. There might not be as many assets in there. But at the same time, I try to explain to people, it doesn't matter if you have $1,000 or $100 million, you still need the same structure in place, because an executor is going to need to settle debt. An executor is going to be the one who's going to be identified on the death certificate. They're going to be the signator on many of these to close accounts. Otherwise, they might be coming after the estate.
Yeah, and the executor is going to be held personally responsible, because they're seen as the administrator. So even if they, try to take money from the estate or do things against the will, it's not uncommon for beneficiaries to want to sue the executor to either have them removed or have them taken to court because of mismanagement of the estate. So if you're taking on that job, and I don't suggest that you surprise somebody, you're gone, and then all of a sudden, hey, I'm the executor. You should have the conversation and say, I'm getting my affairs in order, and I'd really be honored if you took on the job of the executor. Like my friend, she knew the dynamics of her cousin, so she told
No, thank
her
you.
the lawyer, "No, I'm good. I don't need that." So you and then once you have that, and there must be something, not just because they're your best friend or whatever, you also want to make sure that you prepare them as best you can. I mean, you've got to have some sort of plan. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. No plan is going to be perfect. But at least you want to put them in the right situation, that they're not going to spend more than, the 100, on average, 100 hours. They're not going to spend 200, 300 hours, because the honor that you've bestowed on them is going to quickly turn to hate, because how could they leave me with this mess? And on top of that, we've got beneficiaries who know that there's something coming to them, and they're not interested in, you've got to deal with the tax department. They're not interested, you've got to get the house sold. All they're interested in is, when am I getting my check? So you also have to temper the expectations of when the beneficiaries will receive what they're supposed to receive. So I also advocate that the executor keep in touch with the beneficiaries, an email every couple of weeks, maybe a Zoom call, just to let them know, hey, there's something this is what's happening next. I'm getting the house sold. I'm getting the house cleaned so it can be sold. So all of those things can be taken care of first, but you're going to keep them in the loop. The minute that beneficiaries don't hear anything from you, they think you're up to something. Where are they hiding? Are they doing something with the money? Why is it taking so long? So I highly advocate that you stay in communication with the beneficiaries through the process.
David, what you're describing just seems like such a ball of wax of, why would someone want to take on the
It is the
executorship,
worst
especially
job that anybody could want to take on. But you know what? I'm going to ask my best friend. I'm no longer here, but can you just take this on for me? Absolutely no problem.
I can barely get my clients to just like acknowledge it. Yes, you need a will. And then they think that just throwing the will together is enough. And I try to, there's scenarios they need to think about.
There's so many working parts to an estate plan. And I'm here in Canada, you're there in the US, and it's pretty much similar. Between 50 to 60% of Canadians and Americans don't have a will or an up-to-date will. So you might say, yeah, I have a will, but when was the last time it was updated? Maybe it was when you had your first marriage. And you might have your first spouse as the beneficiary. And you haven't updated it. So yes, you have a will and you have an estate plan, but you need to update it. It's a working document. A friend of mine that I golf with, she's lost two husbands, and she said that she had to update her will 5 times. So, and it wasn't too long ago. So it's not that you do it and you put it off. Oh yeah, I've done my will, and you wipe your hands of it. There's a lot of, soon as circumstances change in your life, you need to, and it's going to affect the future of not only you, but also your beneficiaries, the people that you care about. You have to make the changes.
Well, David, I have to share a story that I had yesterday. I was working with a client of mine, and so he is 64 and his mother is 91, still living independently. And it's been a struggle, trying to get the mother's estate at 91. The mother still has a level of denial. We finally got them to the point where they're able to review her latest will, 2004. The last time she updated the will was over 20 years ago. And she sat there at 91 years old feeling like confident, like, I've got a will. You don't have to worry about it, children of mine. And yet she hasn't looked at it in almost 20 years.
Yeah, and 20 years, she probably had some safeguards for guardians for her kids, or some sort of for education or something like that. So it's her life 20 years ago is not the same it is today. So again, it's a work in progress that needs to be updated all the time. It's not, write it and forget it.
So talked about schedule updating, right? Again, we're shifting into this project management terminology. So when you're working with clients, what is your recommendation on how often and what would trigger the reason for updating and reviewing their current will?
Well, you would start with any major occurrence in your life. So that, suppose you get divorced, or you become part of you have a new family, a blended family, or you have children from your first marriage. You might be, again, I always say families are messy. You might want to disinherit, for whatever reason, a particular child. You might right now be giving away some of the assets and giving some of the money right now, which to a particular child, they need it for a down payment for a house, or they're having financial problems. But you're going to make sure that you update the will to take into accord that, yes, I've given money to Johnny, so that shouldn't affect his portion will be smaller than what's going to go to the rest of the kids, because I've already given him some of that money already. So any major life event, you want to make sure that you adjust accordingly to what your situation is going forward in the will.
And then how often do you review your will?
It's a good question. So my will is going to be updated because I just have a new granddaughter, so she's 3, so we have to make adjustments for that. So besides that, everything else is in place. But it's now I just need to adjust to recognize my granddaughter.
And your executors, do you find that you have to shift them around as well based on, who you chose 20 years ago versus who might be identified now? And I would think from a generational standpoint, you want to make sure that you're refreshing the generations. And at what point do you remove a beneficiary because they're becoming of age,
Right.
to the point where they might be at risk themselves? And I could just keep going on as far as primary, secondary, tertiary. What's best practice here?
Well, you want to take in consideration the age of the individual. So my sister, who's a little older than me, she was the executor. Is right now going to be my partner. So she's younger. So I made the adjustment there. And again, it needs to be updated to reflect now for my granddaughter. So again, there's no. I think you just need to think about what's something major in my life that's changed that I need to go out and make the will change. Not wait 20 years like you were talking about earlier, but you want to like continuously be cognizant of what's going on in your life and think about, I need to make those adjustments. Or if you see your executor is doesn't have maybe not in good health, maybe you should change it. Your executor could be sick and maybe not able to take care of themselves. So that, again, that would affect your estate plan. So maybe you want to have a secondary person chosen as the executor if the first one can't.
Let's just pivot a little bit and talk about solo agers, right? Because we've been kind of saying if people had a traditional family where they have children or spouses, but let's kind of pivot. And what's your advice when you're talking to people who are solo agers, that they don't have that traditional support system? How do you advise them in building out their will and choosing executors?
So you would still choose the executor of someone who you trust. And if you don't have an individual, it might be a little bit more expensive, but you might choose a trust company or a bank to be the executor. That's more, it takes away from the personal approach because they're only interested in the transaction to make sure that the paperwork is done and the executors get what they want, and they charge whatever the size of the estate is. So you might go that route. But if you choose a friend and you have no other beneficiaries in mind, then you might think about, how do you want to be philanthropic? What charities, how do you want to be remembered? What's the legacy that you want to leave? Is it animal rights? Is it helping others, the homeless? You could, leave donations to them and make that part of your estate if you haven't got family members that you want to leave dollars to. And it comes down to, what kind of legacy do I want to how do I want to be remembered, and what's important to me right now? Is it the climate, the environment? Do I want to leave something to an environmental group? What is something that makes you feel good, that once you leave here, that what you've accumulated will help others?
So what you're saying is that people really need to be thinking about, if I'm not here tomorrow, right? What would that look like? And just having that conversation alone, how do you manage that? How do you have those, hey, you're an executive. I mean, you making wills and choosing executors, that's your specialty. But how do you start that conversation? Because for most people, just having that, I don't want to think about dying, and the thought of having to put together a will is just too overwhelming. So I'd rather put my head in the sand.
That's not uncommon. That's how I ended up writing the book. For what I went through during the tough times, I would have conversations with clients and friends, and I started to find out that they were saying, I remember a family breaking up because they weren't talking to each other. Or I know of a family who aren't talking to each other because of Royal Dalton China. It didn't go to one brother, to the other. And the more I kept hearing all of this, I didn't want people to go through what I went through. So that's how I ended up writing the book. And you're right. People would either avoid or procrastinate. They don't want to talk about this situation. Spoiler alert, we're all going to die. So let's go from there. So I didn't want to spoil the ending. I don't want to spoil the ending, but this is how it's going to happen. So now you have to make the decision that, do I want to leave a legacy, or do I want to leave a legacy and a mess? So it's up to you. Now there's three types of families. There's a family that is going to avoid it because they think that if we talk about it, somebody's going to die, so it's going to happen. Or there's the family that's going to say, yeah, we've got, like you're the client you were talking about, yeah, I've got a will in place, it doesn't matter. And they don't have the conversations, they don't prepare the executor, and they just let the paperwork do the talking, and they're gone, and then that becomes a mess. Or there's the third type of family that says, you know what, we know this is a part of life, and we need to have open conversations. As much as we dread these conversations, we need to have these conversations now, so that we can pass on not only the money and the possessions to the next generation, but we also want to have open conversations so we can pass on our values and understand that this is the way life needs to go. In my case, my parents didn't have that conversation.
You're saying that your parents didn't have a will at all?
No, they had a will, they just didn't have the conversation. So let me back it up. So my parents came in my office, they had their wills done. I knew what was in the will. I knew it was in the will because there's three of us, but even having that conversation and then usually I sit in with the clients when they're with the lawyer. That day, one of my sisters was there, and she went in the room because I couldn't sit in the room. I could not fathom having the conversation about my parents not being there anymore, and not being here anymore. And that's probably my biggest regret. But the other, even though I knew what was in the will, that it should be split three ways, but my parents never had the conversation with the three of us saying it's going to be split three ways. So fast forward for when my mom passed away, and then it was my dad, one sibling believed that they were entitled to more than the three of us. So we had to end up go to court. So
Went to court because of the dispute between the three siblings, the distribution.
Yes, it should have been a third, but one sibling believed that they should get more.
And I try to explain that to people, that to have these conversations while everyone is of sound mind, that you're not going through a grieving process, and that you have enough time to work through when things start getting sticky. And
Right.
I don't know, it feels like you need to be a family therapist in order to be able doing some of this kind of work.
You really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. You really don't. And I remember the first time we're sitting in court, and like I had said before, we have two lawyers and a judge deciding the fate of my parents' assets that we didn't end up holding on to in the end. But I remember during that time, and I think I was having an out-of-body experience, and I'm going, first off, my parents are probably spinning in the grave.
Oh,
And second, I'm looking at these people and I go, I don't remember seeing either one of these three people at the Christmas table. I don't remember seeing them saying, pass the gravy, could I have some, David? I don't remember. Who are these people and how did we get here? But this is if you don't have the conversations, if you don't plan for the unexpected, because everybody believes, oh, my family's great, we get along, we have the family jokes, we have the traditions, we're good, don't worry about it. I come back to, you don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. Because you have people now that they hold resentments from when they were a child, or they think that one sibling thinks they're better than the other, or one sibling, they don't get along, which is like in my family. So that's where we end up with the problems, which comes back to my theme that I've been talking about season 5 on my podcast. Families are messy. They're just messy. If you I'm sure in your family, there's probably some people that you aren't really favorites.
Well, I mean, let me say, so in my family, my brother,
Yes.
my oldest brother, is an estate attorney. So
Right.
we, for many years, my siblings and I, and he's the go-to in the family, for even my extended
Okay.
family, because he has shown a level of fiduciary duties, trust. He's good at communicating. There hasn't been
Okay.
any sort of discrepancy. Granted, he's a professional and he also has a high level of integrity. Not everybody in our family has that.
Take. I'm getting you family
Let
business.
me,
take out from what your brother does. They're still members of your family.
But it's
that you,
because, but I'm going to say, because my brother has those characteristics, there's a level of like no one in the family
yeah,
is going
yeah,
to push the boundaries or try and
right.
push their agenda. Do I have some extended family members that I don't speak to anymore? Yes. I don't necessarily
Okay.
think that it was.
And do you know of other families that don't have a
Oh,
professional in their
well, that's what I wanted to share with you with this scenario as a professional speaking. So I spoke
right?
to a client this week who, again, we're just starting their final playbook. Just the whole concept of, you know, talking to her as a 40-year-old, and then we're bringing it up a generation and saying, by the way, have you started to have this conversation with your parents? The story is that she is one of 5 siblings, and they have not had the conversation with their late 70 I'm sorry, late 60s, early 70-year-old parents who are not in great health. So my heart goes out to her because I said, can you start to have these conversations? And then tearfully she says to me, I wouldn't know when to do it because there's 5 siblings and everyone is so busy. And she said the only time we get together is during the holiday season. And so she's like, am I supposed to bring this up during the holiday season? Then it becomes like a buzzkill. Like, who wants to talk about this during the holiday season? And my response to her is, when else can you talk about it? Do you just set up like a family Zoom call to say, we need to talk about this? This is the agenda, and let's just try to move through some of the decisions that need to be made. I, how
Okay.
else do you start?
The scenario that you've given is common all the time. I don't suggest you have this conversation. You know, by the way, I've changed my will and you're not in it. Can you pass the gravy? So that's not where I would say to do it. I would say if we're together over the holidays, wait a day or two and say, you know what, can we all get together? Mom and dad want to talk to us.
I mean,
And then mama
do we say
and
like we need to have it? I mean, do you say casually, mom and dad want to talk to us, or actually it's more
absolutely.
actually the conversation, the parents are avoiding the conversation, so it's more of the adult children that need to push, hey, mom and dad, because the adult children, they don't know who the executor is. When I asked her, I said she doesn't know who the executor is.
Okay.
So out of 5 children, nobody knows who the executor
Okay.
is. I'm like, that's a red flag. The fact that the parents are in denial due to privacy, they have this privacy piece that I think that generation kind of shares. And I also think because the parents are having health issues, that there's a level of avoidance and denial there as well.
So the other way how you can flip it is we're still going to get together again a day or so after the holiday dinner, and the kids might say we need to have this conversation, and you might say, Mom and Dad, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about executors and having conversations. I just updated my will and Billy updated his will. We're just wondering, what have you done? Because we just want to know, what do you want at the end? We don't want to be rushing around and thinking, what would mom want? What would dad want? What is it you would like? What have you done? And start it from there and put it back on them and say how they've prepared. But put it on you saying, I've updated what I've been doing because I heard it on a podcast or whatever. And now let's, what have you done? So you put or you might say, hey, did you hear about the celebrity who had the problems? Can you believe that? Did you hear about the celebrity?
Oh, we talk about Matthew Perry and Prince.
Not Matthew Perry, even Aretha
Aretha
Franklin. Can you
Franklin.
believe she had 7 handwritten wills, and the final 2 were the ones that they went with? And which one did they go with? It was the one. There was one in the china cabinet, and there was one in the sofa, and they decided to go with the one in the sofa. Can you believe that, Mom, Dad? What are you doing? You can put it that way as well, but you just want to get the conversation started. Is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. Nobody wants to talk about this. This is what we're talking about right now, is the least sexiest thing that people want to talk about. They'd rather talk about their trip and where they're going, as opposed to when things going to happen in life, that what are we going to do? They don't. And that's where we didn't happen in our family. But more and more families do, even though they avoid these conversations and they dread them, if you want to instill some real love and show that you care about them, you need to have those conversations now.
Okay, so it's a big topic. Can you give us 3 pointers on how to choose the best executor for a family?
I wouldn't say the best, but the person that the person that you feel would be able to handle the job as best they could, and you're gonna set them up not for failure, but you're gonna set them up to be prepared. So who is it you're gonna choose? Are you going, even if you say you have 3 kids, but one of them could handle the work and handle the job, and they understand the dynamics, and you chose them over the other 2 children, for example. So then you would, in your conversation that you're going to have with the kids, this is who I chose, and this is the reason why I chose them. And I don't want any problems. Hopefully, when I'm gone, that you'll respect my wishes and let them handle the because they're going to be under grief and they're going to have a lot of stress. Just help them as much as you can, but I've chosen them, and here are the reasons why. Is that going to sit with people? Probably not, and maybe it's a reason why a lot of parents will avoid the conversation, because they know that the kids are going to act up. They know who they are. But again, if you care about your family, this is the greatest gift of love that you could give to your family, is to be prepared. Recently, I had a friend of mine. They were organized, and we were having the conversation, and she says, you know what made it so great was my parents had everything laid out. We didn't have to do anything. We knew exactly what they wanted. They had it all written down, and it just made our lives so much easier. It gave us time to grieve. We weren't disorganized. We weren't in chaos. We knew what they wanted, and we were able to do that with ease. And we can just transition them easily with peace and grace.
Well, it sounds like you've been able to share all of your expertise in your book. So that's probably the best way for people to stay connected to you and to learn more about your step-by-step process. You want to share more about the book that you have?
Absolutely. The book, or you can just go to my website, davidedey.com. So it's davidedey.com. You go there, you can absolutely purchase the book. We also got a quiz on there, your legacy readiness quiz. So you fill it out, and it'll tell you what you're missing, what needs to be done. There's also free resources. I've got an executor checklist, whether you're in the US or in Canada. So it's a checklist that you would put with if you're the executor, you say, oh, these are the things I need to do. Or if you're preparing your executor, print that out and put that along with your will, along with the other important papers. So, and we touched on not just the death and the will, but we also have to talk about end of life conversations. So you want to have a power of attorney. Before you die, you might be laid up, and you're going to need some. You want to make sure that you've let people know, do I want to be kept alive artificially? Do not resuscitate. So you want to put that also, and make that as part of your estate plan as well. Again, make this as easy as possible. This is the greatest gift of love you can give to your family, is to be prepared. And so when that time comes, they're not going to be lost.
I mean, that's where people avoiding peace of mind for those you leave behind. Yeah. And with that, David, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and also enthusiasm. I mean, the idea here is that we're passionate about this topic because we have both lived through the mess, and there's a way to avoid it. So thank you so much, and we'll end here.
Thank you so much, Niki.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.